After that intense HBO finale, industry creators have a season 5 idea. We know what the ending is. During this interview with Collider, show creators Mickey Down and Conrad K discuss their original vision for the series set in the cutthroat world of finance, how the series has evolved with their maturing concerns, continuing to write themselves into corners they have to find their way out of, the intertwining tale of Whitney and Henry, that Harper and Yasmin are mirrors of each other, rooting for Harper's scene with Sweet Pia, Miriam Pecha, and Kwabena, Tuhib Jimo. Collider. I don't even remotely understand the finance world at all, and can pretend otherwise, but I am obsessed with the characters and their relationships. When you guys conceived of this series a decade ago, did you have a multi-season plan? Had you thought that far ahead? When you were doing season 1, if someone had asked you what season 4 would look like, would it have been anything like it is now? Mickey Down. I wish I could say that we did, but we really did. We conceived the show as a young person's slice of life drama, somewhat based on our experiences working on a trading floor and an investment bank, and evolved into what it is. It's evolved with the concerns that me and Conrad have with what we want to write about, and it's grown with the actors and with the characters. It's become more mature. The concerns have become more mature. The questions it's posing have become bigger and grander, but at its core, it's about the intimacy of the relationships. The suspense thriller elements of this season, or the conspiratorial stuff, or the geopolitics are the background to the intimacy of the relationships. The show started off as a show about these two women, and how they interact differently in the world through their own privilege or lack of, and their own trauma or lack of, and the way that they've grown up with their background. It's about how two people, or two women in particular, try to accrue power and value in the world. We aligned on that by the end of season 1. The show works emotionally when it's about these two women. That's has been the motivational principle of the seasons going forward. But then again, we were just riffing about stuff we wanted to write about. We wanted to write about today's society and about how money influences politics, culture, and media. That's allowed the show to become what it is. It's a privilege. If they had said, okay, we want 5 seasons of a show on HBO about a bank, we'd upheld to that standard and we'd end up writing season 1 5 times. The fact that we never know whether we are coming back or not has allowed us to basically evolve the show every year. We write ourselves into a corner, and then we have to write ourselves out of it. Industry may share similarities with other HBO dramas, but it's evolved into a definitive show of the moment. What did you enjoy about what you were able to do with Whitney Halberstram this season, and what that character added to the story you were telling? We meet him at the height, and then you leave him at the absolute lowest. What was it like to take him on that roller coaster? Conrad K. I feel like we saddled Whitney and Henry with enormous arcs, to be honest. One of my favorite lines in the season is on the embankment after they go to the gay club, and he's like, "Don't worry, I have plenty of middle-class friends." I just thought that summed up the Prince and the Pauper story that we were always telling about identity, and about who Whitney wanted to be. He saw himself in Henry, and Henry allowed himself to be puffed up by him, because, in a sense, he always knew he was below him. We were always telling a story about two men defined by their class and their identity. The moment in the plane with the 2 passports is a crystallization of what the whole show is about. Sir Henry Muck, with his title on his passport, would never become this Lithuanian nobody. It's as simple as that, really. He'd rather face all sorts of justice, and the slings and arrows of the British justice system, than ever flee under someone else's identity and relinquish all the stuff that makes him who he is and gave him his power and all the stuff that he was actually pushing up against in the 2-season journey of the show. And Max Minghella was just a great addition to the show. He's a world-class actor. We gave him more dialogue than he's ever said on screen before. He said he was relieved, after The Handmaid's Tale, that he actually gets to say things and not just look down the barrel of a camera. It was great that he just slotted in and felt seamless to the world, because it was a big swing that we took with him. How do you guys view the moment between Harper and Yasmin toward the end of the finale? How does Harper feel about who Yasmin has become? Where do they go from there? Okay. We thought it was quite an interesting exercise. Me and Mickey have been talking about it since season 3, really, but when we got into the writer's room for season 4, we were like, 3 seasons in, what do people think the character is, and what is the most surprising thing about where you can take them if you're talking about episodic storytelling? Everybody came to the show and thought Harper was this dead-eyed sociopath, and that Yasmin was this wallflower who was scared of her own shadow and was getting the salads. They were mirrors of each other in the sense that they've got a lot of oppositional qualities, and they covet aspects of each other's personalities that they see and don't have. And so, we thought it would be a very cool sleight of hand for the viewer if you could put the image of Yasmin on the desk with a hairband in one next to the image of where we leave her in Paris in season 4, what would be the most chilling and true, but also the furthest she could possibly travel while never sacrificing the principles of who she is, her traumas, her wants, her desires, her status, her privilege, her class? And the same with Harper. She's still a money-making, dead-eyed sociopath. But can we take her on a journey of warming her up and empathizing with her and making her learn stuff from being collegiate and having partnerships, which she denied herself in the first season? It was like, what's the furthest we can take them and leave them, which feels like a true development if you had to hold the images up side by side, but also just never really betrays who you were watching in the first place. Down. They understand one another by the end of the season. In a way that they did. Their relationship evolves to the point where each other's rationalizations become a little bit more understandable. Harper understands how Yasmin works and what she needs to do to survive. She calls her a survivor in episode 8, and vice versa. Yasmin understands where Harper's value comes from and what she needs to do to achieve that value. In certain circumstances, that means taking down the person closest to her. They see each other by the end. At the end of season 3, it kind of got to that point. By the time we end season 4, they've both done quite ridiculously awful stuff, Yasmin more so, but Harper is still able to see the girl that was there. There's some kind of understanding in Harper's eyes when she's looking down at Yasmin and she's seeing the person that she's become. There has to be. There has to be some humanity that she can still see there. Otherwise, the story is over. I think she has way more agency than meets the eye. I would almost venture to say she has full agency, says Shipka of her industry character. I actually really enjoyed the trio of Harper, Sweet Pea, and Kwabena together. There's something about them that I find myself rooting for, even when I'm not sure if I should root for them. What did you guys enjoy about where you got them to in season 4? Will we continue to see more of them in season 5? The reason you root for them, I think, is because this show actually clearly demarcates between good and bad. At least some in a team sense. They read the lesser of two evils, so it's easier to root for them. You feel a sense of, if they could just be proved right, they feel like a force for truth in a universe of lies, which is a quite interesting valence for Harper, especially, to occupy. We've talked about this show as a conspiracy thriller. We've talked about all these movies, and we've talked about Gilroy and Michael Mann, but actually the show functions a lot in season 4 as a cop show. It definitely leans on some of the tropes of police work, journalistic work, and investigative work. They were kind of like police hedge fund managers, which is a cool thing to watch. Do you have a real sense of what season 5 would be? Have you thought beyond that? Have you thought how much more story you need to tell with these characters? Down. I can talk too much about it. We have an idea. We have an idea about what we want to do, but we have to see how season 4 plays out and see if there's any appetite for it. We know what the ending is, though. You've got to. You can write 4 seasons and not think about the ending. Heaton also talks about who Jonathan Byers might cast in his Stranger Things movie, The Consumer.